but it still is an impediment to certain things. The standard in these states is to have 4 different types of businesses. First, you have the growers. Second, you have manufacturers of edible products and other products like teas. Next, you have the retailers. And finally, you have laboratories. Some of the restrictions that states have in place are that in every one of the states, there would not be impulse purchases. You have to specifically go to a standalone marijuana store. They're not sold at grocery stores or restaurants or bars. There is a problem in some states that there's not really any place other than a private home for people to consume marijuana. So they're looking at having cannabis cafes in Alaska, and that's expected later this year. And in Colorado, they're also looking at having a limited number of locations that people can go to consume in public that's limited to people that want to be exposed to it. Edibles have been an issue of concern. Those are food products that are infused with marijuana. There's a concern that minors might confuse them for other kinds of foods that don't have marijuana in them. And also some adults have consumed edible products and not had the intended effect and then consume more, and it takes a while to take effect, and they have gotten way more intoxicated than intended. So states and also the nonprofit I work for have been working on educating people about that. We have a Consume Responsibly campaign that works on both talking about keeping marijuana away from children and also advising people to start low and to go slow. You also see in Washington State, the state requires every single product to be approved for edible products by regulators. So for example, they don't allow gummy bears. The kind of flavors you might have would be chili or ginger instead of flavors that would be more appealing to youth. And we're also seeing child-proof packaging to reduce the chance of accidental ingestion from minors. Another area Washington State went overboard on was one area they went overboard on is they had a buffer zone from a number of locations and stores. And it was a 1,000-foot buffer from schools, libraries, parks, and a number of other locations. And unfortunately, the end result was in Seattle. There was nowhere downtown that these stores could locate, so they're all in a warehouse district. So they're relaxing it a little bit to keep the buffer from schools and to allow cities to have some flexibility so that there will be stores and so that they can outcompete the criminal market and have locations people can find and go to. Whereas when consumers buy marijuana in the criminal market, they have no idea what's in it. It could have dangerous pesticides. It could even be laced with other drugs, and they have no idea what the potency is. In these states, they have laws and regulations for what kind of pesticides can be used, to require testing for potency, and often to also require testing for other contaminants. Now, shifting to the issue of how many businesses are allowed and how they're selected. In Colorado, the state decided to allow essentially any business that complies with all of the state laws and rules, and also they allowed for a lot of local control. So a locality could either completely ban businesses, or they could have a set number, or they could decide to control it through zoning restrictions. In Washington, the state decided to kind of engineer how this would be regulated, and they set a total number of stores that would be allowed statewide and did the application process themselves and ended up with 334. It was a bit low, so they're looking at expanding it to 550 while wrapping in a medical marijuana program that has largely been unregulated into it. In Washington, they also tried to control the number of square feet that would be allowed to be grown, and they spent a lot of money to figure out how much marijuana was being consumed, and they came up with 3 million square feet. And it was not nearly enough, unfortunately, so you ended up with high prices and inadequate supply. So I wouldn't recommend that, or at least would recommend having a much higher number that they use. They have since abandoned the limit. Now, shifting to taxation, of course, one of the reasons to regulate and control marijuana is to undercut the criminal market and to control it. So it's important that a tax rate not be so high that the criminal market can outcompete the legal regulated market. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these businesses it's expected that prices will plummet in time or will go down substantially because most of the cost of marijuana is due to its illegality. At first, that's not the case. At first, costs have been very, very high because there are a lot of investments to comply with all the regulations, to get the land, and for taxation. So Washington, for example, started at taxing at 25% at 3 different points of transfer, and that was far too high, and they ended up having to reduce it to 37%. So one possibility would be starting at a lower tax rate and then in time possibly increasing the tax rate to do the opposite of what Washington has done and make sure that you can outcompete the criminal market. 3 of the states tax as a percentage of the price, whereas Alaska taxes at $50 an ounce when the marijuana is transferred from growers to the infused product makers or to the retail stores. In most of the cases, revenue is used for public education. One of the reasons that teens may think marijuana is not risky is they don't find most of the education very credible. So having a good public education campaign that's focused specifically on risks to minors can be very important. Interestingly, in both Colorado and Washington, teen marijuana use has not gone up statistically at all since it's been legal. And the advertising has also been very restrictive. So when I was in Seattle, I didn't see any ads for marijuana, but I did see 2 posters in the public transit saying, talk to your children about marijuana to tell them the risks. So overall, while the rules and public education campaigns have had some fine-tuning and may need some more, as a whole, these new approaches to marijuana have been very successful. Even a number of skeptics have acknowledged that the sky has not fallen. The states have created hundreds of business opportunities. There are 25,000 jobs directly in the marijuana industry in Colorado alone, while they've generated a lot of needed revenue, $135 million just in Colorado in tax revenue. And at the same time, they've undercut the criminal market and treated adults like grown-ups by letting them make their own decisions about a product that's safer than alcohol.
Congratulations to Karen, the honorary Dr. O'Keefe, for going 1 minute under time. So if we get to the end, she may have a minute left there we can use. I'm looking to see if there's anyone who wants to identify whether they do or do not use marijuana by rushing to the microphone, and it's
the right side of the microphone.
It's Peter McCaffrey. I can't. Which is this? Is the user side or the non-user side?
Well, you know, I saw him with nachos not long ago.
That's very incriminating.
Which microphone do I use for no comment?
Please.
If that's still my right. No, this is Peter. I'm Peter McCaffrey. I'm the Director of Research for the Manning Centre, and the more I look into this issue, the more it seems to be a question between idealism and realism. And that all of the problems that have been identified on stage today may or may not exist, but even if they do, they exist in a scenario where this is all illegal. Mm-hmm. So if you're identifying all of these problems at the moment, then clearly the system is not working. And so my question is, conservatives tend to be very realist when it comes to economic policy. We look at idealistic policies from NDP or Liberal governments on the economy. We say, look, they're saying this is what's going to happen, but in reality, this is the way the world works. Why, when we get to these social issues, do conservatives suddenly become idealists?
Anyone want to?
I'm happy to. I'm sure that people have comments on that. I think that is the challenge. I think that is an extremely a valid statement, and I think that from the point of view of credibility and managing, that is what conservatives are good about, and we tend not to be as good in this particular area because we come to it with a bias. But there's no question that unlike all the other areas that we regulate, this one is already out there and it's already a problem. So the challenge for us is how to manage the problem. So from the regulatory point of view, the medical side, we've got that pretty much managed. What we're not managing at all is this other side, and there are compelling arguments to bringing it into a regulatory process. The challenge, though, is how to do it. How do we, if we go along the line, for example, of having people in Canada, a lot of the legal ages are 18. So our assumption is that our youth are far more reasonable than the youth in the United States. And as soon as you cross that 49th parallel. So we now have to make an argument that we allow people to go to war at 18, we allow people to buy alcohol at 18, and that is one of the beginning points of the endocannabinoid system for the development of the brain. So the challenge is regulating now and bringing in legislation and bringing in a mechanism to manage something without really knowing what the risks are, because it's been illegal for so long that we don't have the studies. So we're trying to make decisions without information, and that's a problem.
Anyone else want to chime in? No. Other microphone, Alex?
Hi, my name is Alexei Simakov. I'm president of the Campus Association at McGill University. I'd like to say that I've smoked marijuana in the past several times. I have a lot of friends in this room and in this conference, and they've smoked marijuana. A lot of us have amazing GPAs. We're activists or volunteers. We contribute to our society in meaningful ways. And for the vast majority of us, we have not struggled with marijuana in any kind of significant sense to our life, other than maybe eating too many chips. I'd like to speak to the doctor in the middle. I sympathize with the concerns of those students and the young people you treat, and that's devastating. I have had friends with mental illness, and it's very effective, and that speaks to the lack of a mental health strategy in Canada, and we need to address that. But there's a difference between correlation and causation. Every person in this room under 30 cringed to the fear-mongering propaganda, and I like to speak confidently that when we become the leadership of this party, we will be legalizing it because there is research. The research doesn't agree with you. We need to do it intelligently, and the way to move forward is to have an intelligent dialogue as to how to limit those risks, not to speak rhetoric about Justin's and how they're smoking weed, so we shouldn't be smoking weed or something. I thank you very much for your comments. I mean, we definitely need to have more conversation about the actual strategy to implement those, and we need to use the research that's happened in the States, and that's the kind of conversation I wanted here, not a conversation about small children who are killing people or jumping off roofs, which is a concern for mental health, and psychiatrists should be addressed in that sense. Thank you for your time here.
Because I don't think there was a question there, we're going to go right back over to Roy, who I trust will have a question.
Yes, well, I'm also a physician, and, we can prescribe marijuana, but, the CMPA actually tells you, our insurance people actually tells me not to prescribe it. I've come to the conclusion it's going to be legalized, but the problem is there are risks, and the risks sort of end around the mid-20s, the 23, 24, and how are we going to sort of adjust that? Even Justin has said that he doesn't think people should smoke marijuana until they're 24 or 25. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of regulatory thing you're going to do. Are you seeing more psychosis in the U.S. now since the legalization? That was my question.
I believe not. One interesting thing is that while there's some thinking that marijuana use might be linked to psychosis, I know that in societies that have seen increased marijuana use, or when you compare one society to another with a higher marijuana use, you don't see an increase in psychosis, which does raise questions about that. Regarding the age, of course, about half of all Americans have used marijuana, and I don't know what the numbers are here, but I suspect they're similar. So right now, people in their low 20s are already using it anyways, and I think at the point you're an adult, you can have honest education, and maybe have a little, within the US, if you have a prescription, you have risks and benefits, you could have something like that to let people know about the specific risks of people of their age, if there is evidence that there is a specific risk, and let them make a decision like an adult. We've seen a lot of success with education about the risks of smoking. Of course, smoking is way riskier than marijuana. It kills about 400,000 Americans a year. But with honest education, you can make a difference in people's behavior. You don't need to treat them like infants and criminalize them. Well, we don't criminalize infants, but punish them for making their own decisions.
Well, I disagree. While I appreciate this guy's comment, I'm talking about youth. I really, your brain is in development until you're 24. Now, I might have felt the same way as this gentleman 30 years ago. Once you start talking about the research, on good research, I can get, I get up there and I'm passionate. Don't take away the fact that I've done 30 years of research on adolescence and psychosis and the harms. And there's no research, long-term research on legalization and how it affects adolescence and psychosis. We know over 30 years the link between marijuana and psychosis. And it's a matter of perception. He says drugs don't affect him. Well, do you know this guy? I don't know. That's a matter of perception. But how does it, he's evangelical. I'm evangelical about this. And it's not just based on passion, guys. Yeah, I'm passionate. You've never sat at the end of a casket of a kid. You got through it. This is in your mama's pot, buddy. And in Denver, what they're putting out in Denver is 3 times the potency of what's coming in from Mexico. That makes it highly addictive for youth. And you're right, they're going to get it. So I'm not just kind of just blowing a bunch of passion here. What's wrong? I'm talking about real issues here, real facts. And that's what we're doing. This doc's saying there's confusion out there. So it's a very passionate issue. I agree with that. But I've had to go back down and talk to the population. It's not just 1 or 2 kids, guys. It's the #1 issue with youth. And they don't see it as a perceived risk. That's a fact. And there is increased, the research I'm seeing in Colorado and Washington, usage is up. Problems are up. That's 1 or 2 years. I'm talking 30 years of research. I don't want to come up here. I'm telling you, I don't like coming to conferences or just throwing this grenade in there because that's how it's viewed. I'd rather go back to work and try and help these kids and families. You know who's the best message for carrying this message? It isn't me. It's that kid that was destroyed by this, the parents that say this is a slippery slope. I probably agreed with that way back then, and they see it different. I see it different. But am I passionate about it and I'm just an alarmist? You should be alarmed. You should be alarmed with where we're going with this. And even economically, you say, well, we're conservatives. We just look at the economics. I'll tell you, that NDP guy, he cared about his kid, and so did the conservatives. You care about your kids in the future and what's going in there. Do your homework. Don't get up and just beak off. Show me your research. I'll show you mine. And then I'll have you meet a kid or a family that lost their kids to this. And when it's your kid, it's a different ballgame. So I don't think I'm just going up here and being an alarmist. I'm telling you the facts of what I've learned by working on the reserves of Saskatchewan 30 years ago and watching the number one issue.
We've got a lot of people at the mic, so maybe we can go back over here.
Hi, my name is Dean T. Harris. I'm here with the Libertarian Party of Canada. I was the candidate in Ottawa Centre in October. So one of the core conservative principles is supposed to be promotion of free market ideals, and that includes the right for people to make bad decisions, to make distasteful decisions, and conservatives generally accept that in the economic realm. If you make a bad investment, you're going to be responsible for the ramifications of that. We accept that for the most part with social decisions about our health and well-being. So what is different about marijuana that makes it appropriate to use the force of government to make decisions for people and not allow them to make decisions and live with the consequences of them?
Yeah, I'm happy to initially address that. And just before I do that, I think that your comments with regard to age and information are absolutely germane. And they tie right into your comments in terms of a libertarian point of view. It's based on respect for the individual, isn't it? And is based on information. And I think that like John Stinson, who is the CEO, when he says that there needs to be caution in terms of where we're going, it's that we can be as libertarian as we want, but our decisions are as sound as the information that we have when we're making those decisions. It's very much like the analogy with stocks. If you're not given the information and you make a bad financial decision, it's your right to make that decision. But I would suspect that you also want to have appropriate information before buying that stock. And that's really what we're talking about here. We have started a process. And we're moving down a line because so many people are using it already that we have to manage the problems as the gentleman referred to before. But we're doing it in an environment where we don't have all the information. And I think that there are people there that are just saying there needs to be a degree of caution in terms of the process. Let's watch what we're doing. And if we make the wrong decision, often the regulatory structures are so big and so large, it's very difficult to pull back if a bad decision has been made. So I don't think that anybody would question you in terms of your libertarian point of view, and that needs to be respected.
Over here.
Mike Waite from Edmonton, Alberta. Could any of you talk about the differences or what it means between decriminalization and legalization? Are they one and the same? Or does legalization offer a solution in terms of framework that maybe decriminalization alone does not?
I could do that.
Please.
So they're fuzzy terms. So the way we use them at the Marijuana Policy Project is decriminalization is when you no longer jail somebody for possessing marijuana. So it does nothing with the market itself. Whereas legalization would involve making it completely legal. Under decriminalization, this person may still get a fine, possibly. But with legalization, it's totally legal for an adult to possess it, and ideally it sets up a regulatory structure so you can purchase it and you do away with the entire criminal market instead of keeping sales on the illicit market.
Over this side.
Yes, my name is Roger Proctor, and I'm CEO of Genex Capital. I just want to say that the way the Conservative Party has handled the cannabis file is nothing short of outrageous, and that can be demonstrated in the decision of Justice Fallon in the Allard decision that came out on Wednesday. The court, in a 107-page report and decision, came out and said that nobody has ever died from a medical marijuana overdose. And it seems to me that until the Conservatives get beyond the debate of whether there's a medical use or not, it's going to be a dinosaur party and will not get reelected on this issue. When is it going to take, what's it going to take for the Conservatives to get beyond that?
Anyone want to speak for the Conservatives?
Well, you're wrong there. People have died, 3 in Colorado, of marijuana overdose.
There's a finding of fact.
No,
that
let me
never
finish.
happened in
Let me
Canada.
finish. You said your piece. Let me finish. They died. No, they didn't. They died. They read the research. Yeah.
Okay,
They
well-
OD'd. Well,
Let's go back over to Ian here. Ian?
All right, thanks. Ian from London, Ontario. So my question relates to both providing information and potency. Is there a way, and is anyone looking into a way, of labeling marijuana products for potency, similar to how we label alcohol products for alcohol content?
Great question.
Yeah, there is actually, and that is required, and there are guidelines. And in fact, if you go on to almost any of the college sites, there has been collaboration across the country for physicians and for nurse practitioners in terms of what you're using and whether you're enhancing the cannabinoid side, the THC side, what the values are of that. The legislation talks about 30 times, without going into that, it's weight-based and it doesn't really reflect the potency, but potency guidelines are there for physicians, and it is expected from a regulatory point of view that the physicians will follow those.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, my name's Kaylee Vokes. I'm from Keswick, Ontario. So I just observed from this panel that we have one doctor who claims there is no research, and then we have a practitioner, someone who works with addictions, who says there is all kinds of research and has only given us snippets of his anecdotal experiences. And then we have the non-doctor who is the only one who seems to have any facts about this. And I note that I'm probably closer to the youth age that you're talking about than any of you. So I was, not that long ago in high school. And my question, I guess, is why do you think that legalizing this is going to make it more accessible to young people? Like, have you ever been to a high school? It's very easy to get a gram or 2 or an ounce of weed, and from a drug dealer, right? And you're funding organized crime that way. And as Ms. O'Keefe mentioned, you don't know what's in that. I've had some friends who had bad experiences from having laced marijuana, and by regulating it, you can have regulation on the content, the pesticides, and what's in it. What we were just talking about, labeling. So why do you think that this is going to be more accessible to youth? And if you say there's no research, do you think we're going to gain any research by continuing to let the criminals sell it? Won't we be better able to analyze and research and learn more about the impacts of this drug if the government is regulating it?
Dr. Lindsey?
Yeah, I think those comments are very appropriate, and I may not have expressed myself appropriately. The comment that I made was that it probably isn't going to make it any less available to people by legalizing it. So one of the challenges, one of the things that's happening is that there is a blending now of the recreational use and medical use. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. People recognize, and it's not just young people that use marijuana, people recognize that they need to use it appropriately and they want a safe drug. So what's happening at the present time is that people are moving themselves into the medical side so that they actually have a product that they know. So your comments are absolutely appropriate. The challenge that a lot of physicians have, though, in looking at this is that they are looking at the benefits of having a known product that doesn't have PCPs in it, that doesn't have heavy metals in it, that doesn't have the pesticides in it, against the counter argument which is if we go wholesale into this and we say that it's absolutely safe and we're not absolutely sure about the safety of it, then we're potentially not exercising good governance because we don't have the information yet. So even just the age, for example, the assumption is that if an adult is of legal age, they can make a decision with regard to whether they should consume or not, be that 18 in some jurisdictions, 21 in other jurisdictions, and it becomes arbitrary, doesn't it? So we aren't giving the information to say there is a greater risk at 23 than there is at 25, 18 versus 22. So to say that there's no research is certainly not true. But to say that we have all the information that we would like before going into this is also very true, which is why individuals say, let's go slow.
And I'm sad to say this will be our last question over here.
Donna Weston from BC. Ms. O'Keefe, you said in the beginning of your comments, I think that you just said it's a fact that alcohol is more toxic than marijuana. So, and a lot of your comments were based on that assumption. So is there evidence, are there facts to uphold that?
Sure. If you go to marijuanaissafer.org, it's a website that my colleagues put together that has a number of studies and citations and links to the actual articles showing how much safer marijuana is than alcohol. I believe in the US they tried to figure out how much marijuana a person would have to consume to get to the lethal dose where you'd overdose. And it's not possible to consume enough to cause a fatal overdose. Whereas with alcohol, to take the desired effect, to get a little buzz, it's about 10 times as much as that it would take to kill you from overdosing from alcohol poisoning. Whereas it's not physically possible to consume enough marijuana to actually overdose in that way. So check out Marijuana is Safer. The U.S. government has spent a lot of money trying to prove how dangerous marijuana is over a lot of years, and it's been vastly overstated, as the research has shown.
Well, wonderful. I think it's great that Karen got the last word, given how prudent she was with her time. I'll make a few comments before we thank our panelists. It's now time for lunch, and as soon as we're done here, please make your way upstairs to the Trillium Ballroom, or if you plan to attend the student lunch to learn about becoming a member of Parliament, head to room 208 on this floor. And a special thank you to Rogers for sponsoring the youth lunch. And of course, don't forget to check out the exhibits and displays outside. And now please join me in thanking our panelists.